Hi everyone, my name is Sluggy. I'm 25 years old and I was diagnosed bipolar 2 almost a year ago. And the point of this channel is to talk about both the illness itself and also various things that I'm doing in order to get better and whether those things work or don't work. So it's kind of a self-help channel for people with bipolar. But I also think that a lot of what I'm going to be sharing will help people who just have depression or anxiety or just are into self-help in general. So with that said, I want to get into my first video, and for my first video I just wanted to talk about my story and just share my experience and share what has happened to me. And I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. One is that I think that for people who are bipolar, who are going to be following this channel or watching this video, I want them to know that they're not alone. That other people are out there struggling with things similar to what they're struggling with. And the other reason also is just because I want people to know, people in general to know what bipolar is like. There's a lot of misinformation in the media and in society in general, and I wanted to share a bit of the reality and, just let people know what it's like. So here goes. I basically started having on and off depression at the age of 12, and I'm 25 now, so it's been more than half my life. And the reason it started at that age, I had been kind of moody before. I was a very sensitive child, but the reason that I started getting, really severely depressed at the age of 12 is because I had moved to a new neighborhood, and I was bullied really, really badly that entire year, my entire grade 7 year from 12 to 13. It was a rich neighborhood, and my family was, we're doing better now, but we were from a more working class background, I guess, and we just weren't as rich as some of the other people in the neighborhood. And I was this new kid, and I was kind of nerdy in general, and then there was this financial issue as well. And so the entire year I only had one friend, and she was also a new student, and it was just us two kind of up against the rest of the school. We were always bullied, everyone thought we were weird. We just got made fun of a lot. We got called names, people would start rumors about us. I remember one time this guy somehow, he would watch me when I was opening my locker, and he figured out my locker combination from that. And he broke into my locker and threw moldy food into it. And just I could go on and on, but just tons of things like that. And it was just such a miserable year. And, even though I was sensitive and moody as a child before that, I'd always had a lot of friends. And, it just, socialization wasn't really an issue before that. And I didn't really have, reasons to be afraid of people or anything like that before this year. But everything just changed so dramatically during that year. I remember even by the time it was October, it was only 1 month into the school year, and I was already dreading going to school every day. When I was going home, I would, cry on my way back. It was just a really, really miserable year, and so I became depressed for the first time that year. And it became cyclical after that. Every year, usually during the winter, I would get very, very depressed. Even if nothing, even in future years, even if nothing was really going on that was bad in my life, I would just get so severely depressed. And I don't just mean that I was sad or something. I have, stayed in bed for days at a time because I just couldn't get up. I was so miserable. Or, just crying for days on end, just really severe depression. And I've been suicidal a lot as well. It started with self-harm. When I was in grade 8, I switched schools after that year because my parents eventually found out and they transferred me to a new school. But for some reason that, I guess, trauma or that pain or whatever you want to call it just stuck with me. And so the next year, grade 8, I was much better off socially. I made more friends at my new school. I was doing a lot better, but for some reason I was still really miserable, and I started cutting that year. And I continued cutting on and off throughout my high school years. I think I stopped when I was about 16 or 17. So for several years, I was cutting myself. And when I was 16, when I went to high school, for us, high school starts in grade 9. So the year after my better year, I started high school. And again, I went to a high school that was not very nice. It wasn't as bad as the school I went to in grade 7. But there was also a lot of, rumors starting and people talking behind each other's backs and just really stupid shit that made me miserable, as somebody who's always been really sensitive. And so in high school, I was being bullied again. And in grade 11, I was 16 at the time. I was almost 17. 16 going on 17 was my first suicide attempt. I overdosed on Tylenol, and yeah, I've had a lot of, I've been suicidal many, many, many times since then as well. Especially this past year during the winter. I didn't try to kill myself again, but I was literally planning, when and how to do it, and I was just so miserable, and it was like November, December, and I told myself that if I don't get better by February, I would actually kill myself. And thankfully I got better before then. But yeah, so suicide ideation has been a huge thing for me during my periods of depression. And then there's the bipolar ups. So, as many of you probably know, bipolar people go through downs and lows and highs or ups. So depending on whether you have bipolar 1 or bipolar 2, that can affect how severe the ups are for you. And for me, I have bipolar 2, and so the high phases or the ups, they're called hypomania, and they're not as severe as people with bipolar 1. And I've actually only had a few, hypomanic episodes. The first one was when I was 15 years old, about a year before I tried killing myself. And I guess during the fall, I got kind of anxious because the school year was starting and I wanted to do well and get good marks and things like that. So things like that can be a trigger for people with bipolar to, go into a hypomanic or manic phase where they're up. So suddenly I had all this energy. I just had a ton of energy, and I was very irritable, which might come as a surprise to some people because the stereotype that people have of bipolar is that, bipolar people are depressed and then they're very, very happy. But actually, for some people, when they're up or high or hypomanic, instead of feeling euphoric, they just feel really irritable and agitated. And that's kind of what my highs have been for me. It's been, instead of euphoria, it's been more like anxiety. Like when you're depressed, you don't have the energy to care about anything and you're just super lethargic. And when I've been up, it's suddenly my thoughts are racing, I have all this energy, and instead of being euphoric, I'm very agitated because I'm like, go. And I don't understand, when I'm in that state, I don't understand why other people seem to be moving so slowly, and like I have no patience for everything, and I'm just like, So that's kind of how it is for me. So when I was 15, I had all this energy that I channeled into my schoolwork. I became a very, very, very good student. I had the 3rd highest average in my grade out of 250 or more people in my grade. So I was studying 4 hours a night, and I had the energy to keep up with that because I was hypomanic. And another thing that happened during that episode was that all of a sudden I developed this shoplifting addiction. And I understand why in retrospect, because bipolar people who are in a high phase or a hypomanic episode will often, they'll become addicted or really want to do risk-taking activity. And for me, the shoplifting addiction wasn't about getting things that I needed, because I didn't really need the things that I was stealing. It was more just about the thrill of stealing something and being able to get away with it, because you kind of have to do it fast and you have to do it in a certain way in order to not get caught. So I developed a shoplifting addiction, and I was stealing, chocolate bars, jeans, t-shirts, notebooks, CDs, yeah, just a lot of random shit that I didn't even really need. And I was addicted to the thrill of it. And of course, at the time, I didn't know that I was bipolar, and I didn't even know that there was a connection between my shoplifting and all the energy that I had that I was channeling into my schoolwork. All I knew was that I felt empty inside, and I felt like the shoplifting was like a really, obviously unhealthy and maladaptive way of trying to cope with that. It was like subconsciously I believed that if I just stole enough stuff, that I would be more fulfilled, or I would be happier somehow. So that was my first hypomanic episode when I was 15. The second one was when I was 23. And again, I became very agitated. I was doing school part-time at that point, university. And I had all this energy that I channeled into, I was involved with a charity at the time, and so I channeled my energy into working with the charity and doing various things for them. And it got pretty intense. Like, I remember there was one time when I didn't even sleep for like 3 days in a row, because I was just so manic and I had so much energy, and I was just like, I was thinking of different projects and things that the charity could do, and then suddenly I would like frantically start researching like how to put that into practice, like how to either organize an event or do a fundraiser or do this and that and the other thing. And it's just like my mind kept jumping back and forth between creating new ideas and then frantically researching how to put them into practice, and like researching and calling people up, and just I did that nonstop for 3 days in a row, without sleeping, without leaving my room. It almost felt as if I was possessed by like this manic energy, like, it was really, really intense. And throughout that entire fall, I just had more energy than usual. I was sleeping a lot less. I just had, this surge of energy. And yeah, I was even more anxious this time than my first hypomanic episode when I was 15 years old. I was just so on edge all the time, and it's like, anything could set me off. And actually, by the time it was around November, it got to be really, really bad. Like, I couldn't even go on the subway without getting super anxious and like basically crying from anxiety, because there was all this stimulation and there was all these people coming and going and things happening, and it was just like I was already so on edge. It really pushed me over the edge, and it was just so intense that I would start crying. And I would start, they say that people tend to be more bipolar people tend to be more sociable when we're manic or hypomanic, and generally that's true. But by this point, I was actually a lot less social, because like I said, pretty much everything was setting me off. Yeah, it was a really intense experience. And then at some point during that year, I ran out of money and I had to go back to live with my family for a short period of time. And I don't want to get too much into the details, but I've always had a difficult relationship with my mom. And I was already so on edge from being hypomanic, and I just could not handle being at home, and I could not handle the stress of everything that was going on. So I ended up running away from home. I was living in a homeless shelter for a while, and it was just a really, really dark and difficult and stressful period of my life. While I was living in the homeless shelter, I did a lot of introspection, and, a lot of trauma and pain from the past just came out. And yeah, like I said, it was a really, really difficult time. There was this one incident where I'd had a particularly difficult day, and I came back to the shelter in the evening, and there was this social worker who always got on my nerves. She would tell me off for, quote-unquote, having a bad attitude, which, in my opinion, was just such fucking bullshit. Because it's like, I'm living in a homeless shelter. Of course, I'm in this dark place in my life. Everybody in the shelter had, quote-unquote, a bad attitude. It's a shitty situation to be in. and she was just so unsympathetic, and I just hated her. But anyway, so there was this social worker, and to make a long story short, I was in a really bad mood that evening already, and I ended up getting into a really petty argument with her, and basically she kicked me out of the shelter. She was like, "That's it, you're out of here." And I was like, "Fine, like, be that way, you know, I don't want to be here anyway." And so after that, I packed up all my stuff, and I had no shelter or place to stay for 2 days, for 48 hours. What ended up happening was that I packed all my stuff, I ran away, and I wasn't literally on the street because it was the middle of February and it was minus 30 degrees outside. And, you know, if I had actually been outside, I don't know if I would have even survived. So I basically stayed in the Greyhound station in our city. And surprisingly to me, I thought it was open 24 hours. Apparently it's not. So during the night, I would go to this 24/7 coffee shop / restaurant thing that was open 24/7. And I would stay there overnight, and during the day I would be at the Greyhound shelter. And the thing is, I had all this stuff with me, and I couldn't exactly sleep normally, because I was paranoid about my stuff getting stolen or about me getting like sexually assaulted or some other crazy shit happening. So in that 48-hour period, I got like 7 hours of sleep. And then eventually I just like completely freaking crashed, and I called my dad and asked him to pick me up. And I ended up going home. And at that point, I think that was the point when my hypomanic energy just ran out. After that, I was sleeping, for the next few days, I was sleeping like more than 20 hours a day. I would like sleep almost the entire day, and I would just get up to get some water and a snack and use the washroom, and then I would go right back to sleep. And to be completely honest, I wasn't even sure if I would make it out of that alive. Like, I actually wondered at one point if the shock of all that and the lack of sleep would literally kill me. But thankfully I survived, and, you know, I'm here to share my story now. But it was one of the most intense and difficult experiences of my life. And at the time, you know, I thought it was totally miserable and dark and all these bad things. But, you know, in retrospect, I've actually realized that that episode really helped me because, you know, like I said, I've had a difficult relationship with my mom my whole life. And even as an adult, I've found that that she's had like sort of too much influence on me, if that makes sense. Like, there is a sense in which emotionally and psychologically I wasn't fully grown up for a while because I was still so dependent on her, and I still cared so much about what she thought. And, you know, that's an unhealthy position to be in, especially as an adult. And I just found that this episode, you know, as difficult as it was at the time, it was almost like a purging in a sense, because it helped me become more independent psychologically and just care less about what she thought. And, you know, I still talk to her, we still get along and everything, but I'm much more independent now and much more mature psychologically. So, yeah. But that's kind of the story of my ups and downs. I was diagnosed a year ago, and I won't tell you the whole story of all the medications that I've tried on, because, you know, that's probably boring and not of interest to many people. But I will say that I'm currently on Abilify, and I take 2.5 milligrams a day of it. I take it in the evenings, and it's an antipsychotic. It's a relatively new one, and there are pros and cons to both taking and not taking medication. I actually am going to do a video or two about this in the future and just talk about like the pros and cons, and, you know, whether people should take medication and what the deal with that is. But basically for me, I think I mentioned earlier in this video that that if I'm not medicated, I'm often suicidal. Like, that's often where the default that my mind seems to go to if I'm not medicated. So for now, at least, I am taking medication. I'm not super thrilled about it. You know, I wish I didn't have to, but it seems to be what I need. And yeah, you know, but having said that, like I said, I kind of don't want to be on medication my entire life. And I think that was one of the catalysts for me starting this channel, is because I want to do other things, and I am doing other things that I'll talk about in future videos, to try to go through a sort of healing process, and, you know, to try to get better, and to try to gain control over my emotions, and become a healthier person, and hopefully lessen my dependence on these medications. I mean, you know, like I said, the medication that I'm taking now, Abilify, it does help me, but at the same time, it's a new medication, and nobody really knows what the long-term effects of taking it are. And, you know, my guess is that those effects are not, you know, minimal, or, you know, not to be dismissed. Like, I have a feeling that it really does shit to you. You know, because if it's doing something as dramatic as changing your mood, like that dramatically, like making you stable, then, you know, that's gotta be one hell of a drug, you know, and all pharmaceuticals have side effects. You know, I've gained quite a bit of weight on Abilify, and so my guess is that whatever the long-term effects are, they're probably pretty intense and pretty severe, and, you know, not something to be trifled with. So my goal right now is to get healthier and to lessen my dependence on these pharmaceuticals. And so I'm doing various things. I'm meditating, I'm exploring my own consciousness, and I'll explain what that means in future videos, and I'll talk more about that. But yeah, if you're bipolar, or if you just have, you know, depression, anxiety, any ongoing mental health issue, or if you're just interested in self-help, and you're interested in how somebody who's sunk as low as I have is trying to get better, please feel free to subscribe to my channel, because like I said, I am going to be doing future videos, and I do have a lot of really interesting things that I want to talk about, and that I will share with you guys. So yeah, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and share and subscribe to my channel. Thanks so much, guys. See you next time.